In October 2020, we made history at the Southmorton Boxing Club by staging the world's first behind-closed-doors white-collar boxing show. We got over 10,000 views on the night across 103 countries. Now we're bringing the live rumble back, bigger and better than before. Follow the fighters in the build-up and vote on the night for your favourites. See all the thrills, spills and skills from the best in white-collar boxing, live and free at the KO Cup.
People from UK who have donated these gloves to us. We really appreciate you, and we want to say thank you for donating these gloves to us. We appreciate you, and may God bless you.
Thank you. Okay, Peter, well, that video absolutely made my day yesterday. That was sent to us by a boxing club in a slum district of Nairobi that we sponsor a bit. We send out gloves and things. We send out any sort of equipment that we deem as not sort of, up to scratch here. We pack it up and send it out there. And, we've got quite high standards, so we send up some decent stuff to them. And yeah, to get that video of thanks, we've sponsored them a few times now, was absolutely fantastic. Made us realise how lucky we are, and how lucky we are to be able to help a bit. And I just wanted to put that out there to the members because, it's the members that enable us to do this type of stuff. But, by paying their subscriptions and everything else, we don't use it just to keep the club nice. We use it in any way we can to sort of, help out in any way we can. So that just absolutely made my day yesterday. I just thought it was a brilliant video. The enthusiasm, the love, the respect. It was really very much appreciated. But today, Peter, I just wanted to talk about, obviously, British boxing came back at the weekend. It was the first show this year in the UK since the board called a moratorium on all shows on UK soil because of the pandemic in January. So they came back at Wembley Arena with a matchroom show headlined by Josh Warrington. Obviously, I want to talk about what happened with Josh Warrington and Lara. But initially, there was another little point of interest. There's a couple of points of interest here about boxing in general that happened on that show. And the first one I would say was the Zelfa Barrett-Kiko Martinez fight. Now, Kiko Martinez, Zelfa Barrett's kind of on the way up. He's 25-1, really good Manchester fighter, son of Pat Barrett. And Kiko Martinez seems to have been around forever. I remember going to see Kiko Martinez in 2007, box Bernard Dunn, win the European title in Dublin. So, but he's been a pro now. This is his 17th year as a pro, obviously ex-world champion. And so he was brought in as a kind of bit of a test for Barrett, but, they thought Barrett would get past him. Now, Martinez was very busy in that fight. I thought he was a clear winner in that fight. At the end of it, Barrett was announced as the winner, much to seemingly his bemusement. And the scorecards, didn't reflect any sort of fight that I saw. I mean, you could make an argument that was a close fight, and you could probably make an argument either way, although in my opinion, I thought Martinez won. But the scorecards were like 118, 111, giving it to two scorecards were 118, 111, giving it to Barrett by 7 rounds. And you just thought, how on earth could you do that? Now, as most people probably know, there's an inherent bias in boxing built into the home fighter. How big that bias is open for debate. A lot of people, when they see a decision like that and they're not in boxing, they think that's just a rigged decision, which is obviously what we've really got a battle against in boxing, and we can't have people thinking that. I think there's an inherent bias towards the home fighter. He's got a load of crowd behind him. The judges are only human. When you've got people shouting and screaming every time some guy lands a punch and silence when the other guy lands a punch, that bias can come through. Now, but obviously in this case, we had no crowds, so that wasn't the case at all. There's maybe an inherent bias towards the home fighter because you've got to remember the promoter is the one who, he doesn't directly hire the judges, but he can say no to judges that are supplied. He can, by every organisation, he can veto them. So people that come in and they will get all their expenses paid for by the promoter. They will get their fee paid for by the promoter. So they know who's paying their wages in effect, and that can probably lead to an inherent bias as well because obviously you want to be invited back. So there is, I think, maybe what you call an unconscious bias. I know that's a popular phrase at the moment, of judges towards the house fighter, but this just seemed ludicrous. And what was refreshing, though, to be honest, when that decision came down, Eddie Hearn started shouting about it and saying, look, we can't have this, because he identified the problem immediately. The problem is, if this happens, if foreign fighters come over here and don't get a fair shake, we're going to get a terrible reputation. I mean, we always used to say about going to Italy, in the 80s, you had to knock them out to get a draw, and so we don't want to be tarnished with that label where fighters think you don't get a fair shake if you go to the UK. The judges are against you. You start the fight, you're 5 rounds down. So Eddie identified that, and so it was unusual for the promoter of the house fighter to kind of complain about the decision and criticise the judges. So what they do about it, I don't know. I mean, you know, maybe Eddie will now say to those judges, I don't want you working on another show because your judging was so erroneous. So maybe it will kind of work in reverse, and we'll maybe get, you know, fairer judges on matchroom shows. I don't know, but hopefully that's a perennial problem in boxing, one that needs to be addressed. And I'm glad the promoter brought it up on the night. Okay, moving on to the Josh Warrington fight, Peter. Obviously, quite an upset here. Josh Warrington was seen as coming into this was #1 featherweight in the world. He was the IBF champion. He parked the IBF belt, got rid of the IBF belt, and I think the thinking behind that was really coming from Eddie Hearn, who was saying, look, you know, you're bigger than the IBF belt. The IBF are mandating you to fight Kid Galahad. Again, you know, we want to go after the big fights, the Kanzus, the Gary Russell Juniors, unify the featherweight division. You don't need to be bogged down in IBF politics. And this seems to be a recurring theme of what Eddie Keane seems to keep talking about at the moment, that the belts are not that important. You know, the fighters are bigger than the belts, and he's almost trying to sideline the belts a little bit and not be bossed around by them. So Josh Warrington gave up the IBF belt, and he hasn't been boxed in 16 months. So he boxed a Mexican kid called Lara came in. He's 22-2. You know, he had a good knockout ratio, 14 stoppages in those 22 victories, but he hadn't fought anybody, you know, of Warrington's stature, of Warrington's class, and he was stopped in a round last year, so it was kind of seen as a bit of a mark-in-time fight. And, you know, in the pre-fight build-up, Warrington was talking about why he'd given up the IBF belt, the big plans that Matchroom had, the next fight. You know, it's the classic almost mistake, don't look past this opponent. And, you know, so he came into this fight thinking, I'm just going to knock the cobwebs off and get the ring rust off, you know, and then move on to this bright sort of featherweight future, because he was the #1 featherweight in the world. And Lara kind of ripped up the script, and in a way, you know, it's a tragedy for Josh, but you've got to think, you know, this is in a way why we love boxing, because, you know, a lot of the time it's too predictable, and things like this happen. A kid like this comes in, rips up the script and does it his own way, and you know, and Warrington was stopped in the 9th. But I think what we need to look at is, you know, I felt coming out, that kid looked super relaxed. He looked super happy to be there. Warrington looked a little bit, not unnerved is maybe the wrong way to put it, but when he came out, you know, Warrington is used to these massive Leeds crowds. I mean, he has a passionate following, and they are absolutely, you know, behind him every step of the way, everything he does. And of course, he's coming out now, and I thought it was noticeable in the ring walk. He came out to, you know, to his usual tune, you know, bigging up Leeds, and every time he went boom, you know, you normally get the whole stadium erupt. When he goes like that, the whole stadium erupts at different points, you know, when they're talking about Leeds. And obviously he was doing that, and there was nothing. Because there was no crowd there. And then he came in, and he didn't look, you know, himself. I mean, I thought he kind of went into trade early on, and I thought in the first round he kind of ducked onto a right uppercut from Lara, shook his leg slightly, and I think, you know, he backed off a little bit and thought, you know, what have we got here? This guy was quite heavy-handed. And then it just seemed, you know, he did just choose to stand and trade with somebody whose feet weren't too fast, whose hands weren't too fast, but, you know, who could obviously punch. And, you know, he was kind of coming off second best, and noticeably as well, he just seemed so stiff. When he got caught, you know, it was like bang, you know, it really seemed to be impacting, whereas Lara was more rubbernecking, he was looser, and the punches seemed to bounce off him, you know, having less effect. And then, of course, the contentious point is that 4th round. He was all at sea in that 4th round. He kept getting caught by the left hook that Lara was throwing. He got caught with a very heavy one. His legs were all over the place. And, you know, the referee could well have stepped in then and stopped the fight, and nobody would have had any complaints, because he was, you know, not only was he down in the 4th round, he was just all over. He couldn't stand up. His legs were underneath him. Lara was going in to try and finish him, and he somehow made it through to the end of the round. That was miraculous. But when he came out in the 5th, his legs were still gone, and you know, he just didn't look right. He was valiantly trying to battle back, and I know we love these stories, you know, when people come back from, you know, the verge of defeat to victory. But what happened was more and more punishment was piled on top of that probably concussed state already. And, you know, it was quite a nasty finish. Medics saw him in the ring, and he was taken to hospital, you know, with concussion. So, you know, with the corner responsible there, his father's in the corner. You know, I think he wasn't recovered at the end of the 4th when they sent him out for the 5th. That was very obvious. It's a difficult one to call. I mean, I like to say, you know, I've been in the corner a few times, and I have stopped fights. And I'd like to say I would have stopped it at the end of the 4th. I thought, you know, all that was going to happen was more punishment piled on top of more punishment, and better to come back and fight another day than send them out and get them, you know, you know, that's the sort of fight that ages you. But, you know, we got to say Josh Warrington really deserves another chance. He does have a rematch clause apparently, you know, and obviously the first thing to do is make sure he's safe and well and get back and heal and recover. And he's going to have a horrible few days, a horrible few weeks while he comes to terms with it. And you know, he's saying there is damage to his jaw and his shoulder and everything else. But a rematch seems the obvious way to go. And maybe box slightly differently. Although, you know, you say against a fighter like that, you want to sort of move, use your skills, and not engage with a sort of heavy-handed slugger like that. But that's really not the way Josh Warrington fights. You know, he's very busy. You know, throws a lot of leather. You know, and he does come after you. So yeah, we shall see. But I think there were 2 points there. You know, in that show, it was great to see British boxing back again. But we maybe have to look at the scoring and also the refereeing in that fourth round. I mean, interesting enough, it was Howard Foster who famously stopped George Groves against Carl Froch when Groves took a few punches and looked slightly in trouble, but he didn't look anything like Warrington looked. You know, in the fourth round of that fight, and you know, and he famously stopped it there, which I know set up the Froch Groves rematch. But on this occasion, he was giving Warrington every chance to stay in the fight, every chance he possibly could. And, you know, for want of a better phrase, he was almost killing him with kindness. Maybe it would have been better to step in and stop it. But there you go. So, you know, a couple of little talking points over that show. Great to see boxing back. And again, you know, it reminds us, although, you know, we're really sad for Josh Warrington, and I'm sure he will come again, but it does remind you how great boxing can be, how the underdog could just step up, be given a chance, grab it with both hands, and, you know, all of a sudden you have a great fight on your hand. And, you know, you have a man like who Eddie Hearn said could just, you know, change his life in one night by taking his chance and embracing it. So, you know, it was part of the beauty of boxing as well. And as they were saying at Josh Warrington in the corner, it's true. That's boxing, great as it is.